Good morning. I happened to be part of a funeral yesterday of a lady from Wayland, and I was riding. I drove the coach because they had two funerals yesterday, so I was helping Marty out, and I happened to drive the pastor, and he said to me, "What are you preaching on tomorrow?" And I thought for a minute and went, "Well, I thought I'd preach about Jesus and the triumphal entry." And he went, "Oh, yeah, that's Palm Sunday, isn't it?" "Yeah, that's Palm Sunday." Now, I know he was, I've been there before. You're extremely wrapped up with what you're doing and everything else, and he was trying to be very friendly about, what are you preaching on and whatever, and then he said, "Well, I'm not preaching tomorrow because we have a guest speaker and whatever." And I said, "Well, you probably wouldn't know. But when you come to certain times of the year on the church calendar, it becomes sometimes, for me, almost complacent that it's Palm Sunday, it's Easter, it's Christmas, And if I'm that way, which I get excited about holidays for a number of different reasons, but other than food, grandkids. You won't get any cake. We're at a point in the church calendar year of Jesus heading towards Jerusalem. Now, we saw for a number of weeks the issue of the prodigal son and his brother and his dad and God. And then last week we spent a little time on this issue of Jesus trying to prepare his disciples that he was going to die. He was going to be put to death. And where we find ourselves is headed towards Jerusalem. Now, it's interesting that all four of the Gospels portrayed the triumphal entry in a little bit different ways. All of them have where he gives the direction to his disciples to go find the colt, bring them back. So we see that of obedience. And then we see that issue of servanthood, that he is serving them. But one of the Gospels takes it one step farther. And I found this interesting this week, that in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, Luke 19, we see from verses 28 through 40 the triumphal entry. And I think it's always beneficial, just like at Christmas time, reading the story of the birth of Christ from the Gospels. This is very similar from Luke 19. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. He approached Bethpage and Bethany at the hill called the Mount of Olives. He sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you'll find a colt tied there which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' say, 'The Lord needs it.' And those who were sent ahead went, found it, and as he told them." Now, this is the issue of obedience. Some of the disciples were buying in. They did whatever Jesus told them to do. If he said, I want you to go walk around this town 4 times, some of them would go walk around the town 4 times, and other ones would go, "We're not going." But these two did exactly what he said, and the people that owned the colt, "Why are you untying it?" They replied, "The Lord needs it." And they brought it to him. They threw their cloaks on the colt and put Jesus on it. Now, I've always wondered, as I read this, what the owners of that colt thought. I wonder if Jesus is going to give us our colt back. Is he going to take it and go somewhere? Is he, there isn't any question here. Just like the two apostles that were sent to get it, they did not question and say, are you going to take it back? Should we tell him anything? He just said, tell him that I need it. And people trusted him. Verse 36, as he went along, people spread their cloaks on the ground. When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven, glory on the highest. And our friends the Pharisees. As I've read the Gospels this year, for some reason, these Pharisees seem to jump out all over the place when Jesus does something or when his disciples do something. These religious leaders cannot help themselves because I think they're buying in to more of Jesus is actually going to take over. And we don't like it because we like ownership. We like to be the leaders. And some of the Pharisees in the crowd says to Jesus, because you see, they're the religious leaders. They feel they have the right to tell him what he should and shouldn't do. Rebuke your disciples. Now, Jesus could have very well tried to explain himself, which many times he did with parables and stories, but he didn't. At this point in his life, he is headed to Jerusalem to die on a cross. He has a mission. He has a goal. He knows exactly what's going to happen to him. He knows exactly who's going to be involved in each part of it. He knows that the people of Jerusalem are going to reject him. They're going to look for a way to have him put to death. They're going to include the Roman government in that part so they don't look guilty. But verse 40, this is his response. I tell you, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. Now, have you ever wondered about that little phrase about the stones crying out? What do you think he's trying to portray here? That he is possibly the creator of all, and when these things happen, creation is also going to respond in some way? I mean, creation definitely responded on the day of his crucifixion. There was an earthquake. There was thunder, lightning, all kinds of things happening. Nature was responding because he had created all of that. So we see the familiar story. We see the disciples and the people of Jerusalem getting excited that their king is coming. But I don't think they bought into why he's coming yet. I truly believe that they still think he's going to come and overturn Rome, the Roman government. That's where their captivity was. They weren't thinking about forgiveness of their sins. They weren't thinking about Jesus dying on a cross. I don't think any of them got that. I'm not even sure the 12 that walked with him had gotten that yet. But one of the things the writer of the Gospel of Luke does that no other Gospel writer does, Matthew, Mark, or John. Put up verse 41 through 44. He's approaching Jerusalem. This is the only place. Now, he has tried to portray to the disciples before about his concern over his people, the Jewish people. He's concerned over Jerusalem. The center point of Jewish culture is found there in Jerusalem. But notice the words that he does. Notice what Luke writes here. As Jesus approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. Now, I don't know why, and everything I read this week does not give us any particular reason why Luke picked this out and the other ones did not. We don't know that. And we do know through the Gospels that each one of the Gospel writers would take a little bit different perspective to the story on who they were writing to and their personality and those types of things. Some way or another, Luke saw especially this issue of Jesus' compassion for the city of Jerusalem. And I don't want to make light of this, but you hear the cry? Lord, I hope you're all right, buddy. Give Grandpa a high five on the way by. Notice how Jesus communicates here. I don't know if the rest of them heard him or if it was just Luke. If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you, encircle you, and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another because you did not recognize the time of Jesus' coming to you. Now ponder these words for just a few minutes. This is a man that before the creation of the world made a decision with his Father that one day he was going to earth and take on the form of a man, a perfect man, and shed his blood for a people that he knew, even though he would try for 3 years. He would preach, he would teach, he would travel. He gathered 12 special ones around him to share the good news with this group. He tried and he tried and he tried to present the kingdom to them. I am your king. And now he's coming down to the final week of his life here on earth. So, of course, there were certain things that I believe Jesus was trying to communicate in his own heart, in his own mind, what these people were missing out on. He knew what his Father had planned for him. He says here, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace. And they're going, we know what would bring us peace. You take down the Roman government and we'll be peace. No, you won't. You think you will. Just because you're delivered from your circumstances, you think you're going to be at peace with God? You're not going to be at peace with God. But see, one of the things that happens here, he said, if you had only known this day what would bring you peace, if you had only believed what I had been teaching you for 3 years. But now, there are some of you that aren't going to have a chance. It's going to be hid from your eyes because you turned your back on me. You're not going to see the truth. I don't understand that part of the sovereignty of God. Never claimed to have, and I will never claim to understand how there are some people, as hard as what God tries to open their eyes, some people just continue to walk away from it. There are 3 things. Did you do these individually, Brendan? Okay, 3 things. Number one, the one author I read this week had 3 things that he believed that Jesus was trying to communicate about his people, the Jews, and about the city of Jerusalem. Okay? Number one, the great privileges that were being abused. In other words, everything that God had given to them over and over and over again. I'm currently reading a book given to me by a young man. He asked me a few weeks ago if I'd read this book, and I said, no, I haven't. And he said, I'm going to get you a copy. I'm reading it. And I tell you what, it opened your eyes, Pastor. So last Sunday, or 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure which, this young man gave me this book by Michael Youssef called The Barbarians Are Here. Any of you read it? If you get a chance, interesting read. I know. It's about ISIS, about Muslims. I know they don't bother us here. We're Washington, Iowa. That happens on the other places, you know. But what I really find challenging, and Stan, I got to tell you, I'm better than halfway through it already. Oh my! If it's any worse than the first half, wow. But this man is a born-again believer, and shares rather vividly what's going on within religious realm and how this so much portrays what happened to Israel in the Old Testament. Every time God would give them a blessing, and they would take it and they would wallow in it for a while. Oh, aren't we blessed by God? And then however many years down the road, they turn around and turn their back on God again. And guess what God does? Spanks them. God's spanking them right now. He's going to spank them again. Even though he has given them the opportunity. Here, God Almighty gave them the benefit of personally touching and seeing the Son of God. And they abused their privileges. The Pharisees and Sadducees abused their privileges. They used all of religion for the issue of benefiting themselves, lining their own pockets, and having control of people. That is exactly, that is exactly what many religions do today. And if you would ask a lot of people that attend Baptist church, well, you guys are all the same. All you ever want is money. These Jewish people had abused the privileges that God Almighty had given to them. Secondly, the great possibilities that had been rejected by them. I'm offering myself to you, Jerusalem. I can't even fathom what it was like for the Creator of all, the King of Kings, to look down on the city, the holy city of Jerusalem, and all of the things that had been rejected by them. And eventually, in this next week span, he knew what was coming. He knew the rejection he was going to get. He knew exactly what physically and mentally was going to happen to him. And his people rejected him. Thirdly, Jesus talks about the great punishment that is coming. He says in those verses, the enemy will come and they're going to tear this city down. And there will not be a stone left on top of another stone. They will kill you. They will kill your children. Now, remember, chronologically, we're at 33 AD. History shows us that in 70 AD, that great city went bye-bye. God punished them. 37 years. So, of course, as I'm studying this week about Jesus lamenting over the city, actually weeping because the city is rejecting him, they're abusing their privileges, and he's saying, I know the punishment that is coming. You don't see it, but I'm telling you, it's coming. It's like many people in our world today. They do things and they do things, and you try and encourage them to understand that if you continue to do this and abuse the privileges that have been given to you, consequences are going to come. Now, I know that all my sins are forgiven, but I still know and understand that if I sin today, there is the possibility of consequences tomorrow, or 10 years from now, or 30 years from now. Consequences come. I told a group one day, and I don't remember exactly where I was, but we were talking about consequences from doing stupid things, and I said, I learned at probably about age 17 that it's not wise to stick your hand in a fan. You might go, well, duh. But I remember the night very vividly. It was a Sunday night at the United Methodist Church on Upton Avenue in Toledo, Ohio, and I'd gone to youth group with all my friends, and it was hot. It was during the summer. It was hot. They didn't have air conditioning then. I know, it's hard to believe. They didn't have air conditioning then. And they had fans going in all different areas, and unfortunately, at that time yet, some of the fans, those big fans, had rather large openings. They're all now, big enough you can't even get a piece of paper in them. You don't get any air out of them. But we were messing around in the youth room, and I was doing stuff like all Italians do. I'm not Italian, but flailing my hands around, and whoop, and took two of my fingers right down to the bone. Whoa! I still can feel it. Called my dad, rushed me to the emergency room, sewed my hand up, and he lovingly, as my dad would say, so whatever possessed you to stick your hand in the fan? I said, Dad, you know I didn't do it on purpose. And he said, whatever possessed you to stick your hand in a fan? Well, consequences come. I was visiting with someone this week that is about the same age I am, and we were talking about some of the things that my body now, unfortunately, feels like because of things that I did 40 and 50 years ago. You know what I mean, right? Yeah, those things that you did that you possibly shouldn't have, and so unfortunately, our bodies as we get older continue to break down. And yeah, I know they put new parts in and they do all kinds of stuff, but there are still parts of me that, I like to think at almost 68, I still in some ways feel like a 40-year-old. Well, no, I think like a 20-year-old. But feel like a 40-year-old, but in other ways I feel like I'm 106, Rough to get out of bed some mornings. Consequences. So as I'm reading this and studying this week, and then also reading this book, The Barbarians Are Here, about what's happening in the churches today, I was reminded of some questions. And this author, and he's talking about churches in general. He's not talking about First Baptist Church or Methodist Church or Lutheran Church. He's talking about the Church of America in general. Okay? And he makes this comment that really hit me. I had to underline it and star it. And many Christians on both the right and the left have lost faith in the power of the gospel to change hearts and to change society. So instead of preaching the gospel, we have tried to force change on society through political power. In other words, if we put just the right people in power, they will change government and make life easier on us. Isn't that great? I shared with you a couple weeks ago about this issue of abortion in Des Moines and how we, the Republicans have got the House, they've got the Senate, they've got the governor, they've got everything else, and we still can't get a baby-killing bill passed. I'm shaking my head going, what? You said you would, and now you get there and go, well, someone else has got more money than you, and I'm going to do what they want me to do. This whole thing of give and take. So I'm saying to myself, so should we continue to be involved in politics? Absolutely. You change the hearts of people that are in power, and you change what they do. That's what happened in our lives, wasn't it? When we came to know Christ, didn't your thought pattern change about sin? I know a lot of people that were pro-abortion before they got saved, and once they got saved, they went, oh my goodness, how could I have ever been that way? I don't know. There was probably a time in my life as a young man that I thought, my goodness, that's not up to me. But yet at the same time, as churches, if we do not share the good news of Jesus Christ, people's lives are not going to change. But then he says, many of our churches today are stuck in this issue of 21st century idolatry. Some would have us to believe that the Christian faith contains some truth, other religions contain other truth, and if we put all these truths together and sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya, we'll have a more complete truth. This is 21st century idolatry. God made it clear to Israel that there are not many paths to God, there is only one path to God. And Israel put him on a cross. Dr. Francis Schaeffer, great theologian, 3 decades ago, wrote this. A large segment of the evangelical world has become seduced by the world spirit of this present age. And more than that, we can expect the future to be a further disaster if the evangelical world does not take a stand for biblical truth and morality in the full spectrum of life. For the evangelical accommodation to the world of our age represents the last barrier of the breakdown of our culture, and with the final removal of this barrier will come social chaos and the rise of authoritarianism in some form to restore social order. Do you want to take a look at the United States of America in the last 50 years? We'd like to say, many would like to say, well, yeah, things are the way they are morally and spiritually in this country because of the government. The government's done it. They've taken away all our rights. No, they haven't. We have allowed them to make us think they have taken away our rights, but nobody has taken away my right to preach the good news of Jesus Christ. Nobody has taken away your right of becoming a Christian and serving. But becoming a Christian and serving in our day and age today is not as popular as what it was 40 years ago. Matter of fact, you've heard recently, and possibly have seen even this week on Facebook, that there is a country halfway around the world called North Korea. Did you happen to see this week what the leadership of North Korea did to Christians? Huh? They found 80 Christians that had Bibles in their house. They arrested them, took them to a coliseum, invited the public in, put bags over their head, and shot them all with machine guns because they owned a Bible. How many of you have a Bible in your house? What would you do if someone came to your house, tried to take it away from you? Oh, that's all right. I got another copy. I've got 15, 20 copies in my office. You can have this one. It doesn't matter. No, you're not taking my Bible away. You're not taking the truth away. But here's what's happening in our country. There is that social gospel that is slowly but surely rolling into churches all across the United States. We don't want to rock the boat because then the government will come. Let them come. So I have 3 questions for you as I close this morning. 3, did you put all these on one? You can. Yeah, put them all up at the same time. 3 questions I have from Jesus' lament over the city of Jerusalem. I want you to think in your own personal life here as a Christian in Washington, Iowa. We're not Jewish. We don't live in Jerusalem. But I think many of these principles can apply to us today. Number 1, what great privileges are we abusing? What great privileges has God given to us that we're saying, it's not a big deal? Why make a big deal out of this, Darryl? Just leave it alone. They're going to do what they want anyway. No! I don't make this 2.5 trip to Des Moines and 2.5 hour trip back just to say I went to Des Moines. I'm going there to take a stand for truth. Put Bibles into the hands of the senators and representatives and try and lead them to Christ. Dave Watson and I had the privilege of meeting with numerous representatives. And I shared last week Jared Klein. I know that Jared and I, there are some issues we just don't agree on, and we've chosen to agree to disagree, and that's fine. But he knows where I stand. He knows I pray for him. You know what? If we don't pray for our people in Des Moines and our people and our representatives in Washington, we're abusing the privilege that we have. Now, why do you think that might be? Well, can I think from the perspective that I've heard people say to me, you don't really think our prayers are going to change the heart of someone in Washington, D.C., do you? My prayer may not, but God may change him. Number 2, what great possibilities are we rejecting? The Jews rejected their possibility of salvation. What are we rejecting? Had the privilege of going to a concert Friday night. Marvin was there and a few thousand other people at U.S. Cellular Center. Casting Crowns, Danny Goki, and Unspoken sang. And Casting Crowns is promoting Compassion International, supporting orphan kids around the world. And he made a comment that really stuck with me, and I put it on my phone in my notes. It says, God has not blessed us so that we say we have. God has blessed us so we can give. If everything that God blesses us with, we go, I can accumulate more and more. Let's build another barn over here. Let's build another church over here. No, why don't we take care of what we have? We're taking an offering right now for 6 weeks for 2 ministries. And as we get close to the offering, I'm going to share a little story with you. So I don't want to spoil it here, but I think in some ways we have great possibilities that we are rejecting and not allowing God to do in our lives. And number 3, what great punishment might be on the horizon? Now, I'm not talking about personal punishment. I'm not talking about loss of salvation. I am talking about the possibility if you sin, you might get spanked. I understand that. But here's what I'm thinking. There is some strange reason, as I read through the scriptures, that I cannot find the United States of America anywhere in prophecy. I think there's a reason why. Now the question is, how close are we? I'm not predicting. No. But what's really interesting is that more than likely the barbarians are here. They're already here. And they're waiting to take us over. And if Christians don't do something about it, they're probably going to take us over. Oh my. What great possibilities. What opportunities we have. And I think so many times as Christians we squander what He's given us. We spend it on things and spend our time on things. If you get a chance, you got a bulletin today. On the inside of that, on the back is a little insert. You got a chance, read that little insert on the back. It is so well done about the issue of giving of time, giving of possibilities, giving of... We have not been blessed to say we have. We have been blessed to give. We've been saved for us to be able to have a testimony of telling others that they don't have to go to hell. And so many times we turn and walk and say, well, there's just no hope for my neighbor. Boy, there's no hope for my... Yes, there is hope. So one last question as I close. If Jesus cried over a town of people that were going to reject Him, I've got to ask myself, when was the last time I cried about some of the people around me that I know aren't going to heaven? I think there are times that we can become so busy with the doing that we lose the perspective that there are some people that we know that don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And there is a real good possibility that we are the tool. We are the light. We are the one that God is waiting. He's going to open a door for us to share the good news with that person. And we go, oh, but not today. Maybe next year. Maybe next Easter. Maybe next. Well, there might not be next. Do not squander the possibilities. Do not abuse the privilege that have been given to us. Because I believe we can lead some people into a relationship with Christ so that they may not have to go through the punishment. Gracious Father, the words of Christ penetrates our hearts. There is something in our lives about the issue of the holiday season. Palm Sunday, Easter, Christmas, that has some people's attention. And Father, cause us to look towards those opportunities that we might be able to share. Help us not to squander the blessings that you have given to us, but to reach out and grab a hold of those possibilities that we might make a difference in people's lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Andrew?
We come to